Alright boys, this is a very special servant that's going on right up for me specifically, because without this servant in particular, I wouldn't even be here right now. The ZTL channel would not exist. I would have never played Fate Grand Order, and that servant is Jalter, or Jolter for short. I had just finished watching Fate Apocrypha. I really liked Jean, and my buddy told me, did you know, in the mobile game Fate Grand Order that I'd already tried to play once, mind you, he said that a servant named Jalter was going to be coming out in a few months and I should get ready to try and pull her, and that is what started me playing this game. So we have everything to owe Jolter, alright? If you enjoy this content, you need to build a shrine to Jolter. She is the one responsible for me even picking up this game in the first place. And Gilgamesh, yes, is my favorite Fate character, but Jolter is the favorite Fate waifu character, right? So she's basically right there, neck and neck with Gilgamesh. So suffice to say, this review might be a little bit biased, but I'll try my absolute best to point out the flaws. If there be any flaws whatsoever, I will do my utmost to be the same ZTL that I am with every other servant, and I will try to be as unbiased as possible, but I make no promises. I may simp very heavily for this servant. However, if you enjoy FGO content, I make videos every single day. Maybe not this ecstatically, maybe not with like a 1-minute intro of me just simping over a servant, but I do make them every single day. And if you enjoy FGO content, all I ask for is a like and a subscribe to the channel. But if you really feel like going that extra mile, you really like what I do, consider clicking that join button and becoming a channel member. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and look at Jolter's hits. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the quick card kinda sucks, but who cares if the quick card sucks? It has 3 hits, she's only got 1 of them, and her star gen is 6%. That is absolute poo-poo stinky garbage, but you know what's really great about that? It doesn't matter because Jolter is not a star gen servant. What is very good is her NP charge per attack is 83%, and she has 2 hits on 2 arts cards, meaning if you can get an arts crit with one of these babies, you're going to be genning a metric ton of NP back. Obviously, you're not going to be really genning a whole lot if you can't pull off that crit, but as we'll get into later, the name of the game with Jolter is Big Unga Zunga Damage, right? That's all she's here for, and crits are going to be a huge part of that. So, more than likely, you'll be able to get some crits on her arts cards. Then, it's almost too perfect, right? Like, on the ZTL channel, we talk about the extra attack so much over here, and it's just almost fitting that Jolter has a very OP strong extra attack with 7 hits. It's almost too perfect. For those of you that don't know why that's so good, now I really do stress this extra card in all my videos, but truthfully it's not very like relevant on support type servants. Like if Merlin had like 37 hits on his extra attack, that would be phenomenal, but you're like never gonna use it because he's a support type servant. You're not really brave chaining with him, but for offensive servants, the extra attack being good can take them to the next level and even somewhat save their kit if their kit is somewhat bad. Because the extra attack is a composite card. It gens stars, it gens NP, and it does really good damage. So just treat it that she's got some really OP 7-hit card that's going to be genning a lot of NP and is going to be giving her quite a few stars to play with. Jolter and a Brave Chain, surprisingly, can drop a decent amount of stars to play with, despite her star gen stat being so low, and that really is in part due to the fact that her extra attack has 7 hits and her buster cards have 4 hits. Remember that buster cards can actually drop stars, it's just they're not quite as good as the quick cards are, but she can still do it. So surprisingly enough, Jolter can give herself a decent amount of stars to play around with, but not nearly enough for her to be doing like massive big busty crits. But speaking of crits, let's go ahead and talk about some of her skills. Now her first skill, Self-Modification EX, is giving Jolter 50% crit damage and fat star absorption, both on 3 turns, on a 5-turn cooldown. Now I'm not gonna lie, while this is still a very solid skill, because 50% crit damage is the same amount of crit damage that Waver gives, and the star weight is pretty decent, because Jolter is an Avenger, and you're going to be pairing her with like double Merlin, or God forbid you throw a Rider next to her, she's still going to struggle to kind of absorb those stars. So do keep in mind, if you've got like 30 stars and you pop this skill and you're like, all right, big buster crit time, she might not actually absorb all of those stars because her natural star weight is pretty low, and she's around people like casters and riders that have like a much higher natural star rate than she does, and they're going to be kind of sucking up those stars. And I will admit, this is a bit power crept. 50% is still good, but it's not like some of these other servants that are giving themselves like 100% crit damage, or they have 2 separate procs that add up to 50% when conditions are right. You know, it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not trying to put her down, but I am going to say that we're starting to see a little bit of age with her. Despite Jolter being the servant with the highest attack in the game, it still means her attacks and her crits are going to be doing insane damage. Again, she's still a buster servant, so remember that Merlin's going to come in and juice her up with like 100% buster buff and 200% crit damage, so having an extra 50% isn't really going to be all that bad. It's not really going to hurt her, but they could definitely do something with that to kind of make it a bit better, right? Then we have her second skill, which I'm glad they gave this a secondary buff because one, it has a little bit of future proofing because it's a charisma, increasing the party's attack by 20% for 3 turns, you know, just standard charisma. It's already at that 20%, which is the new standard. I do like to see that. But then they kind of future-proofed it. So Jolter got the ability to double buff people with her charisma before it was like really cool. Like now we have a lot of people like say Elizabeth who double buffs females. We have Maeve who double buffs males. You have Steno who double buffs divines. But Jolter was doing that before it was cool, alright? And she's double buffing dragons. So if you have the dragon trait, you're getting 40%. And again, this is on a 5-turn cooldown. Again, notice how the cooldowns are very, very low. So she can actually function very well in doing this burst damage. The only thing that really sucks is that Jolter, the dragon witch, does not have the dragon trait. Despite the fact that she can like summon Fafnir and everything. They didn't give it to her. Obviously, they didn't want to give her like a 40% attack buff because that's pretty insane. But come on, DW, like throw her a bone. You don't gotta buff any of her skills or her NP. I know you guys are afraid to touch things, but just give her the dragon trait, right? Or maybe that's like one of the skills you buff, right? Maybe her first skill, when you pop it, it gives herself the dragon trait. Like something along those lines, right? That's really all you gotta do, and Jolter's getting a massive bit of help from that. Or you could give her a battery, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway, finally we have her third skill, which is the big busty buster buff, right? She's getting 50% buster performance for 1 turn, gaining invincibility for 1 turn, and she's dealing 1,000 damage to herself, which, funnily enough, when I was starting to play this game, that's what like the Game Press tier list were saying made her bad. They were like, I don't know, like, sure, Jolter does a lot of damage, but she does 1,000 damage to herself, and she doesn't have a whole lot of HP to begin with, which is true. She does do damage to herself, and she doesn't have a whole lot of HP. But do you know who you're pairing her with? You, lucky commenter number 476. What is she paired with? Merlin? What does Merlin do? Oh, he regenerates HP. That's crazy. So it's almost like the demerit that she has isn't really a demerit at all. That's insane. And then even before Merlin came out, you know, and you're still using Jolter to like blow people up. I mean, it's a dark time using double waver and Jolter. I still remember doing that for like Onigashima and everything. Or Rashomon, whichever one. The one with Ibaraki, alright? But even during those times, the 1k demerit really wasn't all that bad. I mean, just use a master skill and give her like 3k HP. Easy. Use Hans, who also has the HP regen effect, and then, you know, you're covered. Never really saw it as a big deal. The only thing that I could really say is negative about this, because there's 2 effects that are very good. Lots of buster damage, very, very good. It's what Jolter wants. Invincibility, giving her a method of survivability is very, very good. Very good for challenge quests, which is where you're going to be using Jolter predominantly. The only thing is that the big buster damage is tied with the invincibility, and that is kind of annoying because it's the Raiko or like the Jack effect, where you're gonna find yourself wasting one of the effects to get the other. Like you need to fire off an NP to get enough damage to break the break bar, but you're like, man, I really don't want to waste my invincibility. Or it's the other way around. You're like, man, I'm about to get smacked with an NP, you know, Merlin's illusion buff isn't like up right now, it's still got a few turns before it comes back. I'm gonna have to press the button so that my Jolter doesn't die, but then you're leaving so much damage off the table. That is an insane amount of damage. A 50% buster performance buff is redonkulous. So far, the only negatives I really have about Jolter is The quick card is kind of weak, but who cares? The first skill, it could be stronger, like we're seeing a little bit of a power creep from it, but it's still good, right? 50% for 3 turns is not bad, but it is a little power crept. And then the third skill is probably the only legitimate criticism so far, is that it is annoying to have the Buster buff and the invincibility tied together. But let's look at her NP, which, do keep in mind, Jolter is the third most damaging servant with her NP, as long as like no other calculations have come out, because over here on the wiki we haven't updated the calculations since summer camp, right? And there's been a few people coming out here every now and then being like, I did a calc for a servant, and trying to like keep track of all of them is a little hard. But so as far as I'm aware, as far as to my knowledge extends, she is the third highest damaging NP in the entire game, keeping in mind that she's never been buffed. They have not ever touched Jolter, which is insane. They also haven't touched people like Alter, who also has like the second highest in the game, right? But do you keep in mind, I think Kentoki is also up there for having like one of the highest attack values in the game. I believe he's number 3. Again, unless another servant has come and stolen that from him. He's like 3 or 4. Like, he's very high up there. And they've started to give him buffs, you know what I'm saying? So like, Alter and Jolter probably aren't that far around the corner. Now, probably not going to get NP buffs, because that's going to skyrocket their damage and give them additional effects. And Jolter's NP is already super good as is. It's doing an insane amount of damage. It has 10 hits, so I don't know, maybe if you've used Merlin's illusion buff, maybe you'll drop a few stars. I really wouldn't count on it, but maybe, you know, maybe you'll get like 5 stars or something. But then it inflicts buff block status to an enemy for 1 time. And what that means is that if your opponent tries to buff themselves with an invincibility, guts, pierce invincibility, just anything like that, it doesn't go through. She completely negs their ability to do that. And that is so OP, right? For instance, I was doing the final fight in Lost Belt 3 against Mr. Chinaman, and one of the things that makes that boss fight so hard is that his NP is really good. Like, as good as he is to use for soloing quests, you basically have to fight him in Lost Belt 3 with additional buffs with every time you break one of his break bars, right? But if you time it correctly, Jolter hits him with her NP, hits him with the buff block. He tries to pop his NP to give himself all the buffs, and none of them go through, right? She just completely decimates all that. Because that NP counts all those buffs as like activating all at the same time, she just negates all of it, right? Now, obviously, they could use like one skill, get rid of the buff block, then use their second skill, but usually the AI is not that tactful. They're gonna go straight for their kill skill first, and then if it doesn't work, they're just like, oh, I guess that sucks. Like, you know, you kind of just neg their strategy. She's also inflicting curse damage to them, which I am very fearful that if they buff Jolter, they're gonna give her like a curse stacking growth mechanic, right? Like evil curse or something. I pray that's not what they give her, because she's already doing more than enough damage. She doesn't need extra chip damage. Honestly, I really don't know what they would give her. Like, I think something really strong would be dropping 30 stars when she uses her NP. I think that would be super powerful, because an NP upgrade is already going to increase the damage of her NP astronomically. So they don't need to be like, hey, let's give her like 30% NP damage before she uses it. Like, Gilgamesh needed that because his NP hit like a wet sock. And so they gave it the NP upgrade and then 30% NP damage to make sure he would actually do enough damage. But Jolter doesn't need that. She's already got all the damage she could ever want. So that is something I would like to hear from you guys in the comments down below. What do you guys think Jolter should get as a buff? Personally, the 2 things that I think would really help her out is her having a way to give herself the dragon trait. I think on skill 1 or skill 3, that'd be very, very solid. I don't think it would work on skill 2 unless the dragon trait thing procs first and then the double charisma would affect her, because then otherwise it's kind of a moot thing of giving herself that trait. Special damage mod against like saints or good alignment characters might be good, or having an ability to just drop a whole lot of stars. Like maybe her first skill gives her 50% crit damage, star weight, and then like 30 stars to play around with. She needs something like that because she's already got damage taken care of. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Simp video is now over. You gotta bear with me. I only get to talk about Jolter every so often. She doesn't go on Raid Up very often at all. So when I have a chance to simp, I'm gonna simp super hard, alright? But with that being said, you guys have yourselves a nice weekend. I'm gonna go cry myself not being able to pull higher NP copies of Jolter, and I'm gone. Peace late, guys.